Tonight at 10, police use water cannon in Belfast during another night of violence in Northern Ireland. These are the scenes in West Belfast this evening, where fireworks and more petrol bombs have been thrown despite calls for calm. It comes after violent clashes last night between Catholic and Protestant communities at the so-called Peace Wall.
The scale of the disorder last night was at a scale that we have not seen in recent years in Belfast or further afield.
More than 50 police officers have been injured in the past few days. Also tonight, the Health Secretary insists the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine remains safe, with the risk of a blood clot the same as going on a long-haul flight. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, releases text messages he sent to David Cameron after the former Prime Minister asked the government to help a finance company he was involved with. The mother of a 19-year-old student found dead in Essex says his disappearance wasn't taken seriously enough by police.
If Richard was different colour, if he wasn't black, I know it's hard to say that, but the discrimination was quite obvious.
And heading back to some sort of normal, while some are finding rolling back restrictions daunting after a year of lockdown.
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News Channel, the Masters is underway at Augusta, but it's been a frustrating first round for Rory McIlroy. He finished with a 4 over par 76.
Good evening. Police in Northern Ireland have used water cannon tonight as more petrol bombs and fireworks were thrown on the 7th night of violence on the streets of Belfast. The renewed unrest comes despite a plea for calm from the British and Irish Prime Ministers, who issued a joint statement this evening. Police say the clashes between Catholic and Protestant communities last night were some of the worst violence they have seen in recent years. During an emergency session of the Northern Ireland Assembly today, politicians on all sides lined up to condemn the attacks. Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy has the latest.
On an already febrile situation, now more fuel on the fire. At one of Belfast's peace lines last night, the peace was broken. In the hands of teenagers, petrol bombs thrown in both directions over the wall. Each evening, these gates are locked to keep the mainly Protestant and Catholic communities apart. Now forced open, rammed by cars and battered closed by police, amidst a running battle between crowds on each side.
It's hard to control. Mobs of kids, when they see one side doing it, they're joining in.
Who's encouraging it?
The loyalist politicians are doing it. Why? Because they got Brexit in and it's not working. It'll take months and months now to repair the damages community-wise, if it ever's repaired.
As the fighting continued between Belfast's Shankill and Springfield Road, local priests tried to warn young people of the danger, themselves in harm's way. The to and fro attacks, which lasted over an hour, have just been interrupted by the arrival of this line of police Land Rovers who pushed the crowd back from this side of the peace wall. Earlier, on the other side of the wall in the loyalist Shankill Road, a bus was hijacked and set alight.
The disorder last night was at a scale that we have not seen in recent years in Belfast or further afield. The fact that it was sectarian violence and there was large groups on both sides of the gates at Lanark Way, again, is something that we have not seen for a number of years.
In loyalist communities, who are staunchly British, there's a backlash over the Brexit deal, which sets Northern Ireland apart from the rest of the UK.
So whenever I got here, the police...
19-year-old Joel was himself arrested in a riot over Easter and released without charge. He tells me he was looking out for a friend. But many who have become involved are even younger. Why do you think this is happening?
I don't think young people really understand the details in terms of the Irish sea border and stuff. I think what they're being told and what they're seeing reflected in the media is that Sinn Féin are winning, the Republicans are winning, and that our identity is under attack. And when they hear those words, when they hear that stuff, and then they're told, all right, and the way that you can help is by going out there and throwing bombs, sticks and stones at people, they're more than willing to do so.
People will say, why were you there in the first place? Wouldn't it have been better to just go home?
The fact is, someone I cared about was in trouble, and I don't think that that's anything that someone can sort of blame me for or accuse me of wrongdoing.
As the clean-up operation began in Belfast, political leaders gathered for an emergency meeting at Stormont to try and bring about calm.
There can be no place in our society for violence or the threat of violence, and it must stop.
What we saw last night at Lanark Way interface, I think, was a very dangerous escalation of events of recent days, and it's utterly deplorable.
In the past hour, police, under attack again, have used water cannons against large crowds gathered on the nationalist side of the peace wall. There's concern the floodgates have opened on something more reminiscent of Northern Ireland's days of old and may be difficult to close. Well, police were clearly braced for more disorder to break out tonight, and there are more protests planned in the days ahead. Now, tonight, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson has spoken by phone to the Irish Prime Minister, the Taoiseach Micheál Martin. They have both agreed that dialogue is the way forward, but while political rows keep on playing out here over Brexit and other issues, it continues to make things difficult.
Emma Vardy with the latest. Thank you. The coronavirus vaccine is now breaking the link between infections and deaths in the UK, according to scientists at Imperial College in London. The new research comes as the Health Secretary insisted that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine remains safe. Matt Hancock said the risk of a rare blood clot after vaccination was around the same as getting one from a long-haul flight. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, reports.
Business as usual in northeast London. Headlines about blood clots didn't put people off getting the AstraZeneca vaccine.
The thought of catching COVID is more riskier than having a blood clot.
Taking any medicine, there's always a side effect, so I wasn't really unduly concerned about having the jab.
79 rare blood clots have been identified out of 20 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. The link isn't proven, but in future, the under-30s will be offered a different vaccine.
For nearly all age groups, the benefits of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine far outweigh any potential harms. For people in their 60s, with the current low level of virus circulation, for every 100,000 vaccinated, 14 ICU admissions would be prevented. At the same time, there'd be a 0.2, or more simply, a 1 in 500,000 risk of a rare serious clot. Now, for people in their 20s, it's a finer judgment. There, less than 1 ICU admission would be prevented, but there'd be just over 1 serious blood clot per 100,000 immunised. But if we look at a period of high virus transmission, such as in January, there, among the over 60s, 127 ICU admissions would be prevented, and nearly 7 in the over 20s.
Neil Astles began suffering headaches and nausea a week after getting the AstraZeneca vaccine. He died of a blood clot on the brain on Easter Sunday. His sister, a pharmacist, says he was extraordinarily unlucky.
But despite what has happened to Neil and the impact on our family, I still strongly believe that people should go ahead and have their vaccine. If you've had 1 dose, go ahead and have your second. If you haven't had your dose yet, make sure that you do. Because overall, we will save more lives by people having the vaccine than not.
The government says there'll be enough Pfizer and Moderna doses for 8.5 million 18 to 29-year-olds yet to be vaccinated. The message from ministers, one of reassurance.
We know the rollout's working, we know the safety system's working, and we're on track to meet the goal of offering to all adults by the end of July, and the speed of the rollout won't be affected by these decisions. So, when you get the call, get the jab.
Scientists tracking the epidemic in England say vaccines are weakening the link between cases and deaths. There are now far fewer fatalities per infection because so many of us are protected. A reminder why all this really matters. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Well, let's take a look now at the latest government coronavirus figures. And there were 3,030 new coronavirus infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. On average, the number of new cases reported per day in the last week is 2,865. Across the UK, just over 3,000 people are in hospital with coronavirus. 53 more deaths have been reported. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. On average, in the past week, 31 deaths were announced every day. The total number of deaths is now 126,980. As for vaccinations, in the last 24-hour period, 99,530 people have had their first dose, meaning more than 31.8 million have had one jab. Another 408,000 have had their second jab, meaning more than 6 million people have now had both doses. Now to the lobbying row surrounding the former Prime Minister David Cameron and the finance company Greensill Capital. In a highly unusual move, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has made public 2 text messages he sent to David Cameron last year. Mr Cameron had tried unsuccessfully to ask for help for the finance company where he was working as an advisor. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young.
Former Prime Ministers don't have much trouble finding work after they leave Number 10, and David Cameron is no exception. He served out the 2-year required lobbying ban that ministers must stick to when they leave office, then ended up working for financial firm Greensill Capital as a paid employee.
Goodbye, sir.
This, like so many other lobbying controversies, is a story about who has access to power, how they use it, and how the powerful respond. Mr Cameron's relationship with Lex Greensill goes back to 2012. According to this business card passed to the BBC, the Australian banker worked for him as a senior unpaid advisor in Downing Street. 12 months ago, at the height of the COVID lockdown, Mr Cameron tried to persuade the Treasury to increase Greensill Capital's access to government-backed loans. Sources say he sent multiple text messages to the Chancellor Rishi Sunak's private phone. These haven't been released, but today 2 replies have. On April the 3rd last year, Mr Sunak thanked Mr Cameron for his message, but said he's stuck back-to-back on calls and would try him later. The 2 did then speak on the phone. The reply on April the 23rd rejects Mr Cameron's proposal and goes on to say, "I have pushed the team to explore an alternative with the bank that might work. No guarantees, but the bank are currently looking at it, and Charles should be in touch. Best, Rishi." Charles Roxburgh was a senior official at the Treasury. David Cameron hasn't commented on any of this since questions were first raised in 2 newspapers several weeks ago. But ministers reject suggestions of wrongdoing.
The former Prime Minister made contact with the Treasury. The Treasury throughout the pandemic have worked with a whole range of different businesses and stakeholders, but the correct processes were followed, and in the end no money was provided to the company. It was turned down as a result of officials meeting them in the correct way.
The Chancellor insists he acted with integrity and propriety. Labour disagrees.
This is a complex story, but it's been made more straightforward this evening with the publication of text messages. We need to see real answers from the Chancellor as to exactly what has gone on. We need full transparency. We're concerned that he may have breached the ministerial code, and we need an investigation to get to the bottom of that.
David Cameron once warned about the far too cosy relationship between politics and money. There are rules about lobbying, but critics say they're not tough enough. Now, tonight, Labour is piling the pressure on the Chancellor, saying that all of this raises questions about his integrity and his objectivity, and they're even suggesting that he might have broken the ministerial code. Now, Rishi Sunak suggests any idea that he's done anything wrong. He says it's absolutely right that he and the Treasury were listening to all sorts of ideas about things that might help companies during the COVID pandemic. And of course, in this case, what David Cameron was suggesting was turned down. Now, of course, when it comes to lobbying, all sorts of people make their case to politicians and government departments all the time. And of course, not for the first time, many are now wondering whether all this is transparent enough.
Vicky Young in Westminster, thank you. The mother of a 19-year-old student who was found dead in a pond in Essex 2 weeks after being reported missing says his disappearance wasn't taken seriously by police. Richard Okorogea's death is currently being treated as unexplained. His mother, Evidence Joel, claims her son was discriminated against because he was black. Today, the police watchdog opened up an investigation as a matter of course. Sangeeta Maiskar reports.
The search for Richard Okorogehe, accompanied by desperate pleas from his mother for his safe return, captured the country's conscience. The 19-year-old university student went missing 2 weeks ago. Richard had sickle cell disease, yet he left his West London home on the 22nd of March without a coat or his medication. He caught a bus at 8:45 p.m. and was next seen on this CCTV footage a short distance from Epping Forest in Essex at 20 to 1 in the morning. His body was eventually found in this large pond.
I worship the ground he walks on.
Today, his mother, who works night shifts as a nurse, described the last time she saw her son.
He said to me, "Well, you're going to work now?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, drive safely. Don't drive too fast. Okay? Drive safely, Mommy." I said, "I will." He said, "I love you." He said, "I love you too, Mommy." So he held the door. And he said to me, "Mommy, I'll be going to my friend."
The Metropolitan Police say Richard's death currently remains unexplained and that his body shows no signs of injury. His mother says that concerns about his vulnerability, including his need for regular blood transfusions, were dismissed by the police.
The initial treatment was disgusting.
And that's a very strong thing to say. Why do you say that?
Everything I said was dismissed. It meant nothing. I was told by one of the officers I called, he said, "Well, if Richard is in pain, as you say he has sickle cell disease, he will find his way to the hospital." I said, "Hold on a minute. If Richard is in pain, he can't move."
Richard's mother claims that his race was the reason for the alleged slow response by the police.
Because if that was somebody else, I feel that they would have acted quicker or quickly.
When you say that, what do you mean if you were someone else?
If Richard was different colour, if he wasn't black. I know it's hard to say that, but the discrimination was quite obvious.
Responding to the allegations, the Metropolitan Police say they've worked tirelessly on Richard's case, using the full range of their resources, including work behind the scenes. Richard's mum does not believe he took his own life, describing him as happy and aspirational. Richard was her only child. She is bereft.
It's a big hole, a massive hole that can never be covered again. Especially learning that maybe he will not walk through that door anymore. He will not walk through that door. My baby will not walk through that door again. To see him, to embrace him, say, "My mommy." Oh, Richard. Richard has so much to live for. He has so much to give.
Evidence Joel, Richard's mother, ending that report by Sangeeta Maiskar. President Biden says he will introduce a series of measures to try to reduce gun violence in the United States, which he says is at epidemic levels and an international embarrassment. Well, let's talk to our North America editor, John Sopel, who's at the White House, and always an incredibly difficult issue for a US president. What could he do differently?
And just look at the scale of the problem, Sophie. There have already been 11,000 gun deaths so far this year in America. So 11,000 deaths at the hand of a gun in just over 3 months. Now, you'd have to say that what Joe Biden has proposed is pretty cosmetic. He's saying you should no longer be able to buy gun kits where you can assemble a gun and there's no serial number and it's untraceable. An accessory for a revolver should be banned from sale. This is at the edges of the scale of the problem, and Joe Biden would concede that. He wants more far-reaching legislation, but what he can do by just signing a piece of paper is very limited. He needs to get Congress to act, and he says they should act now. But they won't. There aren't the numbers there to get this legislation through. And so you have the American public saying that, for example, on whether anyone should have a comprehensive background check before they're able to buy a gun, well, the American public says yes, they should. But the power of the gun lobby means that that is not going to happen. The president is calling for action now. I think the chances of that happening are slight in the extreme.
John Sopel, thank you. More than 320,000 people are now thought to have died in Mexico with coronavirus. The authorities have updated their figures, which are some 60% higher than previously admitted. Mexico has the third highest number of COVID deaths after the US and Brazil. Our Latin America correspondent Will Grant reports now from Mexico City.
Ivan Sanchez often takes his wife and children out to eat in a local cafe in Mexico State. But these days, someone is missing from their regular family lunches: Ivan's father, Mario. He fell ill from COVID shortly after Ivan got the disease. Unwilling to go to hospital, he tried to ride out the virus at home and died on this very sofa. Ivan grapples with the grief and the guilt of having infected his father every day. Many thousands in Mexico have died like Mario, untested, under the radar, and not included in the official statistics.
After he died, I asked a friend to help me with the paperwork so that his death wouldn't be registered as COVID, but as a respiratory collapse. We did it so we could give him a proper wake at home.
As government data suggests, a staggering 320,000 have died from coronavirus in Mexico, public health experts believe cases like Mario's mean the true picture is even worse.
Most analysts extraofficially are arguing that our number could be higher than that 320-something thousand, that we may be about 500,000 dead.
If such a dire estimate is true, Mexico needs to vaccinate its people soon. In one of the worst-hit municipalities, there was tentative hope and optimism as the most vulnerable received their jabs.
But nationally, the criticism is there simply aren't enough doses to go round, and there has never been a proper strategy in place to cope with the scale of the problem in Mexico.
Veronica Villanueva saw her parents vaccinated, a huge relief after her brother recently died from coronavirus. Veronica blames President Andrés Manuel López Obrador for underestimating the pandemic from the start.
With elections coming, he doesn't care about the virus. He just wants to keep the economy moving because shutting it down would turn even more people against him.
But keeping tourism afloat has had deadly consequences, and now a new spike is expected after the Easter break. Social distancing at prayer, face masks at Mass. As Mexico mourns its dead, only the US and Brazil may have lost more. Yet the final figure here may never truly be known. Will Grant, BBC News, Mexico.
A murder investigation is underway after one of the UK's richest men was stabbed to death at his home in Dorset. The hotelier, Sir Richard Sutton, who was 83, died yesterday evening. A woman in her 60s was also stabbed and remains in a critical condition. A 34-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Dorset police say he and the victims were known to each other. A doctor has told a court in America that the way police restrained George Floyd against the street during his arrest in May last year meant he could not take in enough oxygen, leading his heart to stop beating as he was pinned against the ground. Martin Tobin, an intensive care doctor, was giving evidence at the trial of the former police officer Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis. Mr. Chauvin was filmed kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. Derek Chauvin denies the charges against him. Tomorrow, the trial is expected to hear from the medical examiner who carried out Mr. Floyd's autopsy. The Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, has condemned what he's called the bullying actions of Myanmar's military regime after the country's ambassador to the UK was barred from entering his embassy. Kyo Zamin was locked out last night, saying the building in London had been taken over by the Burmese military. But the Foreign Office said it had to accept the decision by the generals to remove the ambassador after he criticised the coup. As elections to the Scottish Parliament draw closer, young people across the country are considering which party they'll back on May the 6th. 16 and 17-year-olds are eligible to vote, and as our Scotland editor Sarah Smith found, they're eager to hear bold ideas on education and climate change, and they're also hoping to see more diversity in Scottish politics.
Over 100,000 young people, like Paisley Art student 17-year-old Isla, will be voting for the first time next month. Like most of their age group, they support independence for Scotland and wants more political focus on the environment.
You need to get young people on your side, so number one, they don't lose interest in politics, and number two, if you have a young person on your side, they have the probable pattern that they'll continuously vote for you. You know, who wouldn't want that under their belt?
On the same day, the weather is radically different in Aberdeen, where 16-year-old David is concerned by the economic future and opportunities for those who risk becoming part of a lost generation.
When I go to the polling station, I'll be thinking about a number of things, but mostly, which party is going to rebuild Scotland, for the better as we, exit this pandemic, and who can lead the country out of the pandemic, focusing on the economy, the jobs, and, opportunities for young people.
We gathered together a group of under-18s, including David and Isla, from all over Scotland to explore their priorities in this election. After a year of school closures, education's high on the list.
The main problem I have with it is the inability, it seems, to reduce the attainment gap between the rich and the poor, the affluent and the less affluent. And that was compounded by the manner in which results were awarded last year after the coronavirus cancelled the exams. It was, quite frankly, shocking.
Education in this country is undoubtedly good, but there is always room for improvement.
We now have the opportunity, as we recover from COVID, to actually have to take a look at our education system. So, what is important in this? Is it more about, learning about values? Is it about, learning how to use your brain to make the world a better place?
Is independence a big issue for you? Will it determine how you vote?
At least I believe the union isn't working. Although independence isn't the only sort of solution to this problem, we could consider a new style of union.
The main point that it leads me to support a second referendum is that decision for Brexit.
I'm in favour of remaining part of the United Kingdom because I believe there's many benefits to it, and I think that does. I wouldn't vote for a party that goes against that.
These voters want to see parliamentary candidates from a more diverse range of backgrounds.
We need people who are from poorer areas. We need people who are Asian, black, trans, more gay people in politics. We don't just need more young people, we need more people of every type. The majority of people that we listen to are middle-aged white men who are straight and cis. What's the deal with that?
The deal is, it seems, these under-18s know very well what they want, and politicians would be well advised to listen. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Glasgow.
Golf now, and at the first round of the US Masters, the first major of the year, conditions have been tricky and many of the favourites have struggled. Among the UK contingent, Rory McIlroy endured a frustrating day, finding the water here on the 13th on his way to finishing his round on 4 over par. Lee Westwood, bidding to become the oldest winner of the tournament, fared even worse, finishing on 6 over par. The leaders are currently on 3 under par. Now, next week, more COVID restrictions will be rolled back. You can go to the hairdresser at last. In England, pubs and restaurants can start serving again outside. And in Wales, more shops will open and travel in and out of the country will be allowed. But shifting back to our old ways may not be as easy as we think. And for some, the weeks ahead are both exciting and daunting. Daniela Relf reports.
I think I'm on the thin line between cautious and optimistic.
We just need the general public back to make the market blossom again.
I can't imagine going to the pub and mingling with everyone.
I always have this thought in my head that, oh my God, there are people too close to me.
I think the whole population we're suffering from lockdown fatigue.
The regular rhythm of our everyday is slowly returning. The familiar routines resumed. But for many, their mindset has shifted.
I think there are some people who we probably will never see in church again because of what we've gone through as a society. It'd be very, very hard for them to get their confidence back in going and doing normal things once more.
Memories of a life without restrictions. As freedom beckons, some find themselves conflicted.
I think I feel a bit more anxious, but I still like the idea, I can go out for drinks with my friends again, but strangers, please stay away, So yeah, definitely say I feel a bit anxious, but I'm not too bad.
Normality will mean readjustment, especially if you feel forever changed.
I think it's made me a bit more
introspective, if anything. It's made me value friendships a lot more.
Enticing the crowds back in, it comes with responsibility and a need for reassurance.
It's hard to imagine so many people close up together as scenes you would have seen in the past. And I do think we need to demonstrate that we have a safe environment, that we've thought about those issues.
A thriving business and long waiting lists, but even then, the weeks ahead will be edged with restraint.
They're going to be busy. It's certainly going to be a change of pace because I've gone from not working at all to back into 6 days a week, full-blown life again. So I am a little bit nervous. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, but I am trying to be optimistic. I think it's the best way to be.
The message is both hopeful and careful, both optimistic and cautious. But everyone has that thing that they crave.
I just want to go to the beach in a bikini. Like, I just want to go on holiday.
I cannot wait to go to the cinema.
Spontaneity is what I'm looking forward to.
I don't think you can beat the roar of the crowd with a winning 6.
See the light, it's getting closer. But we've all got to stay careful still. That's the way I see it.
Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Northampton.
And that's it from us now on BBC One. It's time for the news where you are. Good night.